If you were in our class last week, we began this very short series. After finishing the book of Hebrews, and before we start 1 Thessalonians, I wanted to do a couple of lessons on the return of the gods. And last week was the beginning of this, and today is the end of this. If you missed last week, I think it's critical that you get a copy of the lesson, and Michelle will be sending it out. You'll get a video copy of it. Just to review very quickly, we talked about the unholy trinity. We said this unholy trinity of idols came in the 1960s to the United States of America. The unholy trinity consisted of three gods. There is Baal, and he was the god of cancellation, because Baal was the chief god of all the gods, so he wanted to cancel out all other gods so that he alone was the supreme god. In the 1960s, Baal came to the United States. He canceled out the Bible, canceled out prayer, canceled out the Ten Commandments, canceled out God. When COVID came, canceled out the church. And so Baal is the god of cancellation. This leads us to, this leads us to Moloch, the second of the gods. He's the god of sacrifice, child sacrifice, the god of abortion. And then that led to the third god or goddess. Can you give me what happened here, but something's coming up. Oh, okay. I think that'll be okay. Hopefully, I don't have anything for it today. This led to the third goddess of Ishtar. And Ishtar brought in the sexual revolution. And so that was last week. Today we're going to talk about the goddess Ishtar in a different way. And we're going to do so in the context of the movie Barbie and the Return of the Goddesses. Hollywood's attack on manhood, marriage, and motherhood. So let's pray. Father God, it's a sad time to be able to teach the things that we're going to talk about today. It's not fun, but Lord, it's important that we understand what's going on in our country today. It's important that we pray for this nation of ours, because I see us sinking deeply into some immoral sewer that I'm wondering if we could ever get out. Because there's such demonic activity that's happening, and it comes from Hollywood, it comes from the media, it comes from Congress, it comes from our elected officials. God, I pray that this nation wake up to what's happening and that we become wise in how we vote. Our nation and the sanity of the people of this nation is really at stake. So bless me as I teach. God, may this be a lesson that is helpful to all of us here. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. The biggest movie hit and moneymaker of 2023 is Barbie, at the time of this writing anyway. They have grossed $1.36 billion globally. This movie is intended to entertain the modern moms and their 6 to 8 year old daughters. However, there's a message for mom and her young, impressionable girls. And this is what the real Barbie wants moms to understand and convey to their girls. Women have been slaves to men since the beginning of time. They have been ruled by a patriarchal system, and it's time for women to grow up. Hate men, free themselves from them, and take charge of their own life. The movie begins with Barbie as a doll, leaving a make-believe place called Barbie Land to enter the real world as the real Barbie. She sees all the male chauvinism and patriarchal totalitarianism in the real world. Some of her opening lines are in the movie. And here they are. By giving voice to the cognitive dissonance required to be a woman under the patriarchy, you robbed it of its power. In other words, what Barbie is saying is, Barbie observed that women have to give in to the totalitarianism and the demands of men, and thus have robbed themselves of the power to be real women. Now think of an 8-year-old girl hearing the words cognitive dissonance and patriarchy. You wouldn't communicate to an 8-year-old like that. But Mom gets it. She understands that maybe she's been too submissive to her husband. Maybe she needs to be more aggressive at home. Maybe she needs to be teaching her daughter to not think of boys or men as being so important. The word patriarchy is used over and over again in the movie. It is a word used by the feminist movement to disempower women, to make women feel inferior to men, and to make women feel worthless and dumb. Conservative commentator Ben Shapiro listened to about a 30-minute spiel that he gives in regards to the movie, and I selected a couple of quotes from his analysis of it. Here's the two key takeaways I got from Ben Shapiro, who watched the movie. Number one, men and women hate each other, and the only way to get along is to have nothing to do with each other. Now that was Ben Shapiro's understanding of the movie. Here's another take from him, and it's for women. Make men complacent by destroying their masculinity, then seize the power away from them. The driving and moral influence of the movie is an innocent doll named Barbie comes to life as the real Barbie to teach radical feminism, lesbianism, gay masturbation, transgenderism, and the need for women to free themselves from men. One of Barbie's lines is, women only become free when they are free of men. She also says, because Barbie can be anything, women can be anything. Now the question we have to ask is, who is Barbie? So we're going to look at the doll here for a moment and how it came into being. My wife said she played with Barbie and all her friends, and I'm sure maybe some of you ladies here had Barbie too at one time. There's nothing wrong with Barbie and nothing wrong with playing with a doll, okay? It's the movie. That's what we're talking about. But who is Barbie? That becomes the question. Ruth Handler was the founder of Mattel Toy Company, who was inspired to create Barbie as a grown-up doll marketed to young girls. Her inspiration was a German adult gag gift doll named Bild Lily. The girl's name is really Lily. The doll Bild, you'll see, was the popular tabloid in Germany at the time. So she traced, that is Ruth Handler, the founder of Mattel Toys, she traced its origin from a sultry figure called Lily in Germany's most popular tabloid called Bild. Lily was created by a progressive, erotic artist by the name of Reinhard Buthing as a tabloid character for Bild. Lily made her first appearance as a filler cartoon in Bild back in 1952. She was involved in pornography, fortune-telling, and hanging around with wealthy men. She would wear bikinis on streets of the city, only to be worn by policemen because that was illegal back in those days. She would always respond to the police. Oh, and in your opinion, what part should I take off? She was described by the Washington Post, we're talking about Bild Lily now. She was described by the Washington Post as a pornographic character, gold digger, an exhibitionist, and floozy, meaning a little crazy. In 1953, Lily's popularity catapulted her from being just a comic character to an adult doll. She was very sexy looking initially. She was sold as an adult novelty toy and was marketed in bars, tobacco kiosks, and adult shops. It was on a trip to Europe that Ruth Handler, that's the founder of Mattel, first saw Lily, and she was so impressed she purchased several of her dolls. This became the inspiration behind Mattel's Barbie, named after Ruth's daughter, Barbara. Mattel marketed Barbie as the girl next door, sexy but not vulgar. Barbie debuted at the New York Toy Fair in 1959, wearing a zebra swimsuit and her blonde hair tied in a ponytail. The feminist movement criticized her unrealistic body dimensions. Nevertheless, the doll was an instant hit with young girls. Now, not all girls, however, felt comfortable with Barbie. Her body was too perfect. Her proportions were unrealistic, and many gals began to hate their own bodies because they knew they could never look like Barbie, as hard as they might try. Barbie had a significant impact on their mental health. It all led to a severe increase in teenage eating disorders, such as anorexia, bulimia, and binge eating. Barbie was just too perfect for any young gal to emulate. So keep this in mind. The inspiration for the Barbie doll came from a German doll named Lily, who was a sex toy, a prostitute, a lesbian, a gold digger, and a man-hater. That was who Lily was in the early 1950s in pagan Germany. Now, you know who Barbie is and where she came from. Now let's talk about the movie and the real Barbie. Well, Barbie and her boyfriend Ken were very happy as dolls in their heaven called Barbie Land. When they came into the real world, they too became real. Dolls evolved and became to life. According to Messianic Jew Jonathan Kahn, and I've got some of his material in regards to the movie, quotes this. I'm quoting Jonathan Kahn now. The opening scene tells you all you need to know about the movie. A group of silent little girls is playing with baby dolls without any joy. They are nurturing these dolls like a mother would by holding and rocking them to sleep. They comb the doll's hair and do what any mother would do for their baby. It's all preparation for motherhood. Suddenly, says Kahn, there's a vision scene from prehistoric times taken from one of the biggest masterpieces of the history of cinema, 2001: A Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. The famous vision is an ape scene with baby apes all sleeping when a new presence enters the ape tribe. A large black ape monster stands tall above the baby apes, holding a large bone. He begins to smash the skulls of all the little apes, beating them to death. It is then that Barbie appears in the real world. She stands above all the little girls as their protector. Seeing Barbie, the little girls begin to smash their dolls against the rocks, cracking open their skulls. One little girl smashes the head of her doll against another doll, sending pieces of skull flying everywhere. Another child throws her doll high in the air to transform it into Barbie, which appears in big letters across the screen. It all symbolizes the death of motherhood and the fight for abortion rights. By using the ape scene, Barbie has explained to us the meaning she wants to introduce into the children's world. According to this ape vision, before Barbie appeared, little girls were playing with dolls only as an imitation game. It was a way to have a feeling of how their mothers lived. But after Barbie appears, the little girls destroy their dolls and now have the chance to interact with more advanced models of women in society. And that is where all the other Barbies come from. The astronaut Barbie, the CEO Barbie, the surgeon Barbie, the dancer Barbie, the superstar Barbie, the transgender Barbie. They all represent other horizons that girls can have in life instead of only being a stay-at-home mother. This movie is a put down on the role of men in society, as women don't need a man to succeed in life. It is a put down on motherhood, as children only hold back a woman's career. If you get pregnant, kill your baby. Crack their heads open. That is perfectly okay. It reminds me of the psalmist rejoicing over what he thought was God's vengeance on Babylon. Many of you perhaps have never noticed this scripture in the Psalms before. It's Psalm 137, verses 8 and 9. Let me read it and make sure you understand it. It deals, first of all, with Judah being taken into Babylonian captivity. Now there's a prayer on the part of the psalmists, and here it is. O daughters of Babylon, who are to be destroyed, happy the one who repays you as you have served us. Happy the one who takes and dashes your little ones against the rock. The psalmist celebrates the destruction of Babylonian babies, as evidently that is what the Babylonians did to Jewish babies. Smash their heads against the rocks. It's interesting that that's exactly what you see in Barbie, the smashing of the dolls' heads against one another. What the psalmist is saying here, he says revenge is sweet. That is, just as Jewish babies had their heads bashed against the rocks and were killed by the Babylonians, he believes the time is going to come, because the Jews are longing to go back to the nation of Israel. He sees that the Babylonians are going to have their babies, and those babies' heads dashed against the rock. It's like God is going to bring revenge. But personally, I'm not so sure God thinks that way, because children are a gift from God. So here's what Jonathan Kahn says of the movie. The fact that Hollywood could take that doll and turn it into an attack on half the human race, on marriage, on life itself, is a sign of just how sickened our culture has become. This has to be the most widely distributed anti-man movie ever made. Never before has there been a major motion picture directed at children, girls in particular, to the effect of indoctrinating them against men. Just a few years ago, this motion picture could not even have been made as a children's movie. But it shows you how rapidly society is deteriorating. Now let's talk about Barbie and the return of the goddess Ishtar. Ishtar we talked about last week. Gave you a lot of information on that we're going to expand on. Because Jonathan Kahn associates Barbie with Ishtar. Barbie is not Ishtar, but all that Barbie represents is like that of the ancient Mesopotamian goddess Ishtar. She was first known as Semiramis. This comes out of ancient Babylonian mythology. And it dates back, you have in your notes 6,000 years. Change that to 4,000 years. So this mythology dates back to about 4,000 years to Nimrod's Babylon, mentioned in the book of Genesis, chapters 10 and 11. In the Bible, this pagan goddess is mentioned 14 times by the name Ashtura or Ashtaroth. So the goddess Semiramis becomes the goddess Ishtar, who was known in biblical times as Ashtaroth. The Romans referred to this same goddess as Venus. So throughout this lecture, we're going to refer to this goddess as Ishtar. In Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon, Ishtar was the goddess of sexuality and sexual immorality. When Nebuchadnezzar rebuilt the city of Babylon, with construction beginning around 604 to 605 BC, The main entrance into the city was known as Ishtar's Gate. Ishtar was always depicted as a totally independent young woman. She did not need a man, as she often was seen taking roles traditionally assumed by men. She was not the goddess of marriage, as she was rarely linked to marriage. In fact, her ways were generally adverse to marriage as well as motherhood. So we're talking here now about the myths that are behind this goddess Ishtar. So the Neo-Babylon culture was filled with images of Ishtar, including little figurines that people kept in their houses, just like little girls today would own a Barbie doll. While Ishtar was said to be a very independent goddess, she did have a boyfriend by the name of Tammuz. Tammuz is mentioned in the Bible as the god of vegetation, and you see this in the book of Ezekiel, chapter 8, verses 14 and 15. I'll talk about that. In ancient Babylonian mythology, going back to the days of Nimrod and the Tower of Babel, Tammuz was said to be the reincarnation of Nimrod, the man behind the building of the Tower of Babel. Now remember, Nimrod was not only the builder of the Tower of Babylon, Nimrod was the man who wanted to be the first controller of the world. He brought about a one-world government and a one-world religion. And that's the reason why God destroyed the Tower of Babel and scattered the people across the face of the earth. So we're talking about that Nimrod. But now there's a mythology that comes out of ancient Babylon concerning Nimrod. And here's how the story goes. Nimrod was married to Semiramis. Now, Semiramis is not mentioned in the Bible, so this is part of mythology. But Semiramis was later known as Ishtar. While out hunting, Nimrod was killed by a wild boar and ascended to become the sun god. So Nimrod is dead, but he becomes now the sun god. Semiramis was in deep grief and longed for her husband to return to her. As the sun god, Nimrod impregnated his earthly wife with his sperm carried on a sunbeam, and Tammuz was born. So in ancient Babylonian mythology, Semiramis married her son Tammuz, who was the reincarnation of her deceased husband Nimrod. Later in Mesopotamian mythology, Tammuz was worshipped as the god of vegetation and fell in love with the goddess Ishtar. The two became lovers until she betrays Tammuz. This resulted in him dying each autumn or each fall. The wilting of the vegetation at that time of year was seen as a sign of his death. This caused great mourning in the ancient world, and why in the book of Ezekiel in your Old Testament, women were weeping at the northern gate of the Lord's house in Jerusalem. However, each spring, Tammuz came back to life again and fell in love again with Ishtar, only to be rejected, causing him to die again in autumn. You see what you women do to us men? You reject us and we die, but anyway, Tammuz comes back to life again when springtime comes. He's the god of vegetation. So while Tammuz was alive, there was vegetation. But when he died, so did all of the vegetation. And it was all Ishtar's fault. She led Tammuz along for a time, only to reject him over and over again. And that's why we have autumn, and that's why we have fall. That's why vegetation grows, and that's why vegetation dies. That's all part of an ancient Babylonian myth. But it's interesting, that part of that is in the book of Ezekiel as to the reason why the women were weeping over Tammuz. It was fall, and the vegetation was becoming less. However, later on in Neo-Babylonian mythology, and when I talk about Neo-Babylonian, I'm talking about the time of Nebuchadnezzar, who rebuilt the city of Babylon. So we're not going back to Nimrod. That would be the initial Babylon. So later on in Neo-Babylonian mythology, Tammuz was nothing more than Ishtar's sex toy. He was a secondary character, always in the shadow of Ishtar. She dominates and subjugates her lover and eventually destroys him. As you can see, mythology changes over time, including names given to the same goddess. So let's talk now about Barbie and her boyfriend Ken and see how this relates. In the movie Barbie, she too had a boyfriend named Ken. They got along famously in Barbie land, but once they became real characters here on Earth, Ken attempted to take on the traditional male role in their relationship. Barbie would have nothing to do with that. She dominates over him, emasculates him, and eventually he is vanquished like other men for being ignorant and worthless. Women are simply to use men for their own purposes, and when men attempt to exercise authority, women are to dispose of them, just like Ishtar disposed of Tammuz. In ancient Babylon, Ishtar was seen as a cross-dresser, as turning men into women and women into men. Transgenderism is nothing new, but was practiced under ancient pagan goddesses, and that was true of Ishtar. When Ishtar would appear at her temples as a male, females would dress and act like men in their worship. Same was true when she appeared as a goddess. Men would dress like women, and they would worship her. So remember what Solomon said, there's nothing new under the sun. We see this transgender movement today, but it goes all the way back to the worship of Ishtar. Traditionally, Ishtar was a female, but would often change her female identity to that of a male to show her female power. And so in the movie Barbie, it too tears down the family unit and the value of both sexes as the movie infiltrates the LGBTQ agenda with a transgender Barbie character. Now, to sum up the movie, and this is all we'll basically have to say about that, because I want to make some real practical applications of this teaching. But to sum up the movie, Barbie teaches impressionable young girls to take power over men, use them as sex toys. If you get pregnant, kill the baby in the womb. Don't get married, practice cross-dressing, and participate in the LGBTQ community by supporting their agenda. Everything that is traditional and biblical, discard it. Don't have anything to do with it. It's all about hating men, marriage, and motherhood. These are the three main issues that hold back a woman from reaching her fullest potential in life. Jonathan Cahn added one other thing, and this comes from his book, The Return of the Gods, which has absolutely nothing to do with the movie Barbie, but just a quote that I got from that book. Cahn writes of the separation of Tammuz from Ishtar. Remember, Ishtar would have nothing to do with Tammuz. So, he writes this, and it has to deal with Ishtar. It is a movement, that this separation of Tammuz from Ishtar is a movement to advance and celebrate the turning away of men from women and the turning of women away from men. If that is so, there's a similar message in the movie Barbie when she has nothing to do with Ken. What a demonic message to teach our children. Now I want to talk about the avatars of Ishtar. Because the word avatar comes from the Sanskrit root meaning descent. Now in Eastern religion, it speaks of the descent of a deity in bodily form. It's kind of an incarnation. We will use it here to speak of a human being who serves as a vessel for the incarnation of a god, as in an evil spirit. In ancient times and in pagan cultures, Here's the belief. It was believed that when one worshipped a pagan god or goddess, say worshiping Ishtar, the spirit of Ishtar would possess them. We would call this today demon possession. See? But in the New Age movement, it's the word avatar. Isn't that a much better word? Isn't that a word to really sell? I mean, when you talk about demon possession, whoo, we don't want that. So we like this word avatar. Because when you worship the idol of Ishtar, a demonic spirit would come on that idol, but it would also possess the person who's doing the worshiping. Now, in no way are we implying that because some child with her adult parent saw the movie Barbie, that they will become demonically possessed. Let's get that thought away from us. Yet if the influence, here's the point, if the influence of that movie becomes so strong that a child grows up to emulate in lifestyle the character of Barbie as a hater of men, a hater of marriage, a hater of motherhood, in my judgment, it is possible that they could become demon-possessed. I would not question that possibility. Satan is clearly behind the intent of this movie. The destruction of the family, the roles of mothers and fathers in parenting, the aborting of children in the womb of their mother, all of these things are part of Satan's agenda. This movie, in such a subtle and entertaining way, with an attractive adult doll named Barbie coming to life, is Satan's way to deceive our children and tragically parents as well. What better way for Satan to deliver his message than through a box office hit aimed at young, impressionable girls? Now I want to get into our basic text, which is 1 Timothy chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. And it deals with deceiving spirits and the doctrine of demons. And I want you to see how this text not only relates to this movie, but how this text relates to what's happening in society today. Listen to this. These are Paul's words to Timothy. The text is the first 3 verses of 1 Timothy chapter 4. I'm going to read. Now the Spirit expressly says that in latter times some will depart from the faith. When the Bible uses the phrase latter times, it's talking about the end of this present age. And it says people are going to depart from the faith. They're going to become apostate. When we get into 1 Thessalonians, 2 Thessalonians, you're going to see how apostasy very much characterizes the end of the age. So, the Spirit expressly says that in latter times some will depart from the faith. Now listen, giving heed to deceiving spirits and doctrine of demons, speaking lies and hypocrisy, having their own conscience seared with a hot iron, I'll get this phrase, forbidding to marry. Whoa! Forbidding to marry. And commanding to abstain from foods which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and know the truth. So I want you to catch these phrases. Deceiving spirits and doctrines of demons, they're going to become very, very prevalent in the latter times. I want you to notice also the phrase, forbidding to marry. Whoa. See, the movie Barbie is down on marriage. Our society today is down on marriage. Notice also the phrase abstain from foods. This might be applicable, for that is exactly what a lot of young girls did when Barbie was first introduced in 1959. Young girls would ask themselves, how else am I going to have a figure like Barbie if I don't abstain from foods and become anorexic? So it would do us well to remember that Ishtar was an avatar. Her demonic spirit literally possessed those who worshipped her. Now let's get into the real application that I want you to go home. This is going to be helpful to everybody here. And this is the positive part of this message. I've given you enough downtime. Now I want to give you some time here. So we want to ask, what does the Bible teach about men, about marriage, and about motherhood? But first I want to deal with the difference between sex and gender. You know, it's amazing to me. The people today don't know the difference between sex and gender. Now the Bible teaches there are only two sexes, or genders. This is true of animals as well as humans. You're either a male or you're a female. The Genesis record says this. So God created man in His image, in the image of God He created him, male and female He created them. The difference between sex and gender is that sex is based on biology and it is determined at conception and witnessed at birth. On the other hand, gender is a grammatical term referring to one's sex. A gender classifies one as either male or female within a given noun. There are many foreign languages. Greek is an example. Latin is an example. Has nouns. They have nouns in their language for both genders. A male noun in the Greek language, for example, can either be, a Greek noun can either be masculine or feminine or neuter. That would be true Latin, Greek, many languages. So you have masculine gender, feminine gender, or neuter. The nouns of men and male gods are always masculine in gender. The nouns of women and goddesses are always feminine in gender. All living beings have two genders, male and female. Only that which is a non-living, inanimate object is neutral in gender and is referred to as it. No human or animal can be referred to as it. Their gender is either male or female. And yet we live in a time today when there are 70 to 100 genders. It all depends on the period of time. And it's giving a new and unsubstantiated definition to the word gender. There's no language on earth that allows for more than two genders of any living creature. But we are living in a time when progressives are changing the meaning of words to suit their lifestyle. So we're going to ask the questions now. Who is a man and who is a woman? I'm sorry that I have to ask such a stupid question. But we live in a stupid society. As I said, to me it's shocking that we have to ask such a question. But increasingly so, as we are living amongst a generation that cannot answer those questions, especially the question, who is a woman? This is true of public school teachers, university professors, members of Congress, and the Supreme Court of our land. They can't answer the question, who is a woman? Well, I'm going to first of all answer the question, who's a man? And then I'm going to answer who's a woman. So we're going to walk out of here with some clarity. I just wish the people who had problems with this were here. A man is a biological male. Duh. Created in the image of God, who can produce a sperm that when impregnating a woman can create a baby within the womb of the woman. No man, get this, no man can get pregnant. Whoa. The first man, Adam, was created by God on the sixth day of creation from the dust of the earth. When he discovered how lonely he was without a helpmate, God put Adam into a deep sleep, took one of his ribs, and closed up the flesh in his place, and from that rib, God made it into woman, And when he brought the woman fully mature to Adam, who said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh, she shall be called woman because she was taken out of man," I think Adam's first reaction must be in seeing Eve. "Whoa, man!" You know? And that's where you get the word woman. "Whoa, man!" Have a little fun with that. We've just defined a man. Now, who's a woman? Permit me to inform stupid progressives here on who's a woman. A woman is a female, made in the image of God, with a uterus and mammary glands, which are capable of conceiving a child in the womb, maturing that fetus to the point of delivery, and then nourishing that child by breastfeeding. Only a woman can have a child and breastfeed a child. This is an impossible task for a biological male. Yet, if you were to tell a progressive that a transgender can't get pregnant, they would think you are nuts. Besides sexual differences, where the male sex organ is external and the female internal, other differences would be that women menstruate, men do not. Men typically have proportionally more muscle mass, more bone mass, larger brains, and more hair on their body, except for me. Men on the average are taller and stronger than women. The Apostle Peter referred to a woman as the weaker vessel, 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. Yet progressives want trans women who are biological males to compete in sports with biological women. This is getting disturbing here. Such nonsense, in the name of compassion for the confused biological male, is destroying women's sports. Furthermore, both men and women have approximately 10 trillion cells comprising the makeup of their bodies. The cellular construct of a male consists of XY chromosomes, while the cellular construct of a female consists of XX chromosomes. For a male to become a female, or a female to become a male, there would have to be a total reconstructuring of the chromosomes in all 10,000 cells that comprise the human body. That is not going to happen. It is a biological and scientific impossibility. We have seen physical differences between the sexes. Now let's observe some psychological differences between the sexes. The difference between men and women are more than sexual and physical. In a scene from the movie Secret Dream, country western singer Patsy Cline had just returned home from a successful performance. She's in high spirits, energized by the enthusiasm of her fans. Naturally, she wants to share her excitement with her husband, Gerald, having spent the evening at home working on this model ship. Gerald is caught up in his own world. And so he asks Patsy, "How'd it go?" Twice, without bothering to listen to her answer, Patsy confronts him directly and asks, "Do you want to talk to me or not?" When he looks up, she is glowering. But Gerald doesn't have a clue as to why Patsy is so angry. Now, this happens in our house, so probably in yours too. So this classical marital impasse is all too common. A wife seeking emotional connection from a withdrawn husband. Maybe you have recognized this pattern in your own marriage. Huh? In Patsy and Gerald's case, it leads to a painful, vicious cycle. The more he withdraws, the more frustrated Patsy becomes. "I can't stand it," Patsy tells her mother. "It makes me want to scream and claw my face." Conflicts arise in male and female relationships for different reasons. Women interact for companionship. Men interact for competition. Women are far more comfortable dealing with intimate relationships, They swim better in an ocean of intense emotion than men who are more likely to feel lost at sea. Women are more confronting than men, who often cower over emotional issues. Women are more communicative. The average woman speaks 25,000 words a day. The average man, 12,000. The man has used up his 12,000 words at work and comes home to a wife who still has 13,000 words yet to speak. And she gets frustrated because he doesn't say anything. There's also a difference between the sexes in response and reaction. There is a progression of female responses to the male's reactions. She expresses a grievance over something, so the woman's upset. And the husband immediately offers a solution to her dilemma. She ignores the solution and continues to complain. Fed up with the complaining, the husband accuses her of being a nag. Solomon spoke of the nagging wife as like the annoyance of a dripping faucet. Drip, 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 drip. You don't know when to shut up. This tells you a lot about the differences between men and women. Women speak to express their feelings. Men speak to offer a solution that women never ask for. Men assume that when a woman has a problem, she wants advice. But when given advice, she continues to be upset because she really didn't want the advice. She wants empathy, something missing in a lot of men who tend to be too rational and downplay emotions. Now, why do I bring up all these differences between men and women when it comes to the movie Barbie? The movie puts men down and emasculates them. Seemingly, the only salvation for a man is to become a woman. The movie has transgendered biological men into becoming Barbies. The differences between men and women are too great for such a transition, even with psychiatric help and surgery. Now let's talk about the importance of marriage. In the movie Barbie, marriage is portrayed as a patriarchal institution for the enslavement of women. Why would a woman ever want to get married and become a slave to her husband? In 1969, Gloria Steinman wrote the book, Do You Know the Facts About Marriage? Here's what she writes. We cannot destroy the inequities between men and women until we destroy marriage. We must free ourselves, and marriage is the place to begin. That is the message children would take home from this movie. It was God who ordained marriage. Once God created both male and female, the Genesis record says, Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. That's Genesis 2:24. What the feminist movement and the creators of Barbie don't understand is that in a God-designed, totally biblical marriage, the woman has all the advantages. It is the husband who is expected to provide for and protect his wife, not the other way around. Yes, wives are to submit to their husbands as to the Lord, for the husband is to be the head of the wife as the way in which Christ is head over the church. He is to love his wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her. So when a progressive angry woman hears the word submit, she immediately goes into a tizzy without realizing what a wonderful gift she could have from a godly husband. See, the word submit has nothing to do with men being superior to women or women being slaves to men. Since Eve, the first woman committed the first sin, and since Adam, the first man, was created before Eve, God has placed the woman under man's care. That's 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 12 through 15. In taking on the role of a husband, God has made the husband most responsible for the success of the marriage. He is to treat his wife no differently than Christ treats the church. He is to love her to the point, if necessary, to die for her. He is to see to it that all her needs are met and that she feels secure and like a queen to her husband. And yes, she does have a lot of say-so in the marriage. Here's something that you very rarely hear. The woman, the wife, is the despot of the home. In 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 14, Paul tells Timothy that the wife is to rule over the house. Her responsibility is to manage it well. Now, here's what the text says. Paul is writing to Timothy. I desire that younger widows marry, bear children, manage the house. Now, the Greek word for manage the house, that phrase, manage the house, is one word in the Greek language. Oikodespoteia. It is a compound word. That is to say, it's two Greek words coming together making one word. You have the word oikos, which is the word for house. You have the word despotos, which is the word for despot, or master, or ruler. Husbands, when it comes to managing the house, your wife is the boss. Your wife is the despot of the home. If the trash needs to be taken out, or the floor needs to be mopped, she has the authority to say to you, in a loving way, get those jobs done. My wife's here. She shouldn't hear this. The wife is not a doormat to be walked all over by her husband. Husbands and wives are equal partners with different roles. The husband is to take the overall responsibility for the success and security of the marriage by providing for the family. And the wife is to come under his headship so he can successfully do his job. On the other hand, the wife is in charge of running the household and needs the support and cooperation from her husband to be successful and a happy homemaker. So outside of Christ establishing his church, marriage is the greatest institution designed by God. And when husbands and wives fit into their proper roles, not only are they happier people, but studies show that people in happy marriages tend to live longer. Yet to Hollywood and to our progressive society, marriage is a dying institution. So let it die. That is the message from the movie Barbie. And finally, I want to talk about the joy of motherhood. We wrap this up. Marriage between a man and a woman is not only for companionship and helping one another, but its highest purpose is to produce a family, to bring children into the world, to populate the human race. Once Adam and Eve were married, God commanded them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it. Genesis 1:28. We should never forget that children are a gift from the Lord. The psalmist puts it like this. Behold, children are a heritage from the Lord, Yahweh. The fruit of the womb is a reward, like arrows in the hand of a warrior. So are children of one's youth. Happy is the man who has his quiver full. A quiver holds about 6 to 8 arrows. So while the psalmist is speaking about the father who has a house full of children, a quiver full, this happiness is certainly true of a mother as well. So I asked my wife, Kathy, what she thought about being a mother. Here was her response. It can bring great joy and great pain, but the joy is greater than the pain. I think most mothers feel that way. Jesus spoke of little children in their innocence as being likened unto the kingdom of God. He also said, whoever receives one little child like this in my name receives me. Then in Mark's gospel, Jesus said, but whoever causes one of these little ones who believes in me to stumble, it would be better if a millstone were hung around his neck and he were thrown into the sea. Someone might argue that Jesus is not talking about the fetus in the womb, but a child that's already been born. Yet the movie Barbie shows little girls smashing their dolls against rocks, cracking open their skulls. Those dolls were not fetuses. They were imitations of real-life babies that had recently been born. Barbie is an anti-pro-life movie. The real takeaway from the film is, if a girl gets pregnant, abort the fetus, which in Latin is the word for child. I am amazed. I watch a lot of YouTube and people interviewing college students at Harvard and Yale and the University of California and Stanford, and they might tire and they're pro-life. And so the word fetus comes up. And these college students who are at these prestigious universities think that a fetus is simply a clump of cells in the womb of the mother, and it's not a baby. And they are shocked to learn that the word fetus comes from the Latin and means baby or child. That's our educational system today. So this movie then is, don't become a mother. Why? Because it will hold you back in life. It will destroy your opportunity to achieve much bigger goals in life than being a mother. Motherhood is no worthy endeavor. Barbie is a movie to revive radical feminism. It is believed that Barbie herself is a lesbian. Julie Binder, writing in The Guardian, which is a very liberal magazine, tells how her life as a feminist has changed. Here's what she writes. In the late 70s, a group of lesbians known as the Revolutionary Feminists began calling for all females, all you women out there, to embrace feminism. They appealed to their heterosexual sisters, here's the quote, "Get rid of men from your beds and your heads." All feminists can and should be lesbians. Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, and leading the parade for abortion, said this: "The most merciful thing a large family can do to one of its infant members is to kill it." Do you realize when Barbara Boxer was senator, she, of course, was supportive of the abortion movement. And she said that when a baby is delivered from the hospital all the way until it gets to the home, when you walk that new baby into your house for the first time, you can kill that baby anywhere along the line until she gets into the house. That is then when a child has its constitutional rights. Only when it's in the home. But all the way from the hospital to the home, that baby could be killed. This is the sickness of the people that we're electing. Well, what a sick society we live in. It is movies like Barbie that tell me that God is presently stirring up his wrath on this earth, on this evil world, and is ready to send his son and get his church out of here. Folks, I believe the rapture is near. And when you come with me and study 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, we're going to be relating exactly what's happening in the world today again with what the scriptures teach. There's no two books in the Bible that tell us more about end-time events and the coming of Jesus Christ than 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. Everything's being set up. The world is becoming more and more like the days of Noah and the days of Lot, where homosexuality and lesbianism were rampant as well as every other form of evil. Parents have a greater responsibility than ever before in raising their children. It's not only the iPhone and the internet. It's not only a progressive anti-God message coming from their public education and pornographic books in the library. It's the deceit from Hollywood to draw millions of young children to their local theaters to see the movie Barbie. A movie that hates men, hates marriage, hates motherhood. It's time for parents to wake up and come to realize how Hollywood wants to corrupt their children. I say, God, help us. We are in a mess.
Amen.